like I said, is something that I really I look forward to doing, especially coaches that I don't know, like on a kind of firsthand basis. So it's really cool to get you on here, and I appreciate your time. And I told you I came across you originally from the football guys, and then once I started following your account, or maybe I actually might already been following your account and just seeing the content you put out and all, you know, I want this to be a compliment. It's all good stuff, but it's stuff that I don't think everybody also always like there's nothing flashy. It's just good stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, I don't want that to sound like it's a bad thing. It's a compliment that it's like you're, you're doing the basics. You're having your guys do the basics at a really high level. And like, that's kind of my overarching philosophy. So it's something that when I see what you're doing, it's like, I vibe really well with that, but looking forward to picking your brain. Just give everybody a little bit of background on you. Obviously you're at Georgia Southern, but how long you've been there and then kind of what your route to get there has been.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Adam, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have here. But, I came to Georgia Southern back in January of 2024. So I actually showed up about 2 weeks before season started, which was an animal in itself. But I've been here. January will be 2 years. I'm approaching my third season as well. So time flies by. I mean, you probably know as good as anybody. But kind of leading up to getting me here, my whole journey kind of started right around college. When I was in high school, kind of everybody plugs your brain with, when you're interested in science, everybody's like, yeah, you might as well go into medicine or something like that. So everybody's kind of like putting that in my head. And so I went to college with the guys that I was going to go into PA, PT, something to do with that. I wanted to work in athletics, but I kind of didn't know what specialty in a sense. I knew what in order to get a medical school or PA school or any of those other schools, like I knew you had to get a ton of experience. So one of my first roles was working kind of on a hybrid role at my old high school, which was working kind of as you could say like a glorified AT, but also helping out a little bit the strength conditioning side of things. And that's kind of where I fell in love with it first. And then I reached out to Nick DeMarco, who's the current director at Elon. I told him, I was like, hey man, love to come shadow. And the first day I showed up, I was 19 years old as a freshman in college, and I was running a football warm up, for the first time. And trial by fire, definitely screwed it up first day, but ended up getting better at it, obviously, with the 4 years. During my undergrad, I was fortunate to be able to make stops during my summers at a couple different places. So my first internship during the summer of between my sophomore and junior year was at TCU. That's where I met Zach. That's where I met a couple of my other friends, obviously in the industry. And then after that, I ended up getting a paid role the following summer. That was my summer between my junior and senior year at Texas A&M football. That was a paid internship role. That was for the year, but obviously I had to go back to finish my senior year, so I was only able to sign for obviously the off season months during the summer, and worked a good bit with every discipline, but primarily quarterbacks and special teams, helping out there. And then right after that, put my stuff out on social media, started to get a couple of different offers of places to GA, and ultimately ended up figuring out and finding my mentor, Scott Shipman, who's at Mississippi State baseball right now. Ended up coming on with him in a assistant role at Mississippi State. I was technically like my first full-time job, obviously assisting with the team, not leading a team yet, but spent about 8 months there. Loved my time in Starkville, loved the program there. And obviously, he was the strength coach at Georgia Southern before he went to Mississippi State. So when the Georgia Southern job opened up, he kind of had an internal connection there. And he was like, hey, I got this great guy here at Mississippi State. I think he'd be perfect for the role. And my job is obviously to be able to head my own program. So when I had the opportunity there, I jumped at the chance. And I love Georgia Southern. I love the place. Like I always told myself, that job ever opened up, I would jump at the chance to be able to get there. I think it's a great program, great mid-major program, and obviously historically has been a great school in recent history. Obviously from the coaching staffs and the people they've kind of brought through. But yeah, that's kind of the short and sweet about kind of what led me here to Georgia Southern.
Yeah, no, and that's a cool story because, like I said, part of this too is just hearing everybody's different story because everybody's got their own kind of path throughout this field. And a couple things that stand out. Number one, like the T Elon, first of all, like I've been following their stuff for years, their sports performance stuff, and I don't know any of the guys, but I know obviously Nick, and then there was that Jordan. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. I don't even want to try it.
Newsma, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but he's with the 49ers now, I believe.
yep.
And then there was another guy that I think is at a D1 running the D1 football program now, I believe too, right? That was at Elon at one point in time in the last probably 5 or 6 years.
It's a
So it's just
couple
like
of them.
they've just kind of churned out very similar to like Zach DeCant with his TCU internships. Like they're just churning out like great coaches and great opportunities for coaches left and right, which is again it's awesome for you to have been able to go through that. Do you know Joe Padula then? I assume you know him or of him at least. Okay, he
Yeah,
was
me and Joe are pretty good friends. Yeah.
yeah, he was actually kind of, I guess, if you want to say like a really well known. He was kind of like the most well known person I've probably had, at least from like the social media world. He's probably been the most well known guy. And we didn't even get to talk for a tenth of the amount of time I wanted to be able to talk to him, just because they were on the road whenever we did the call. So, but it was really cool to be able to talk to him and pick his brain a little bit. Um, but one thing that you mentioned about Georgia Southern too is you know, in preparation of this, I was looking at the baseball program there, and did I see a thing where last year, or maybe it was 2 seasons ago, you guys beat every other school in the state of Georgia, like every other D1 school? There was some post where it was something like that, where you beat Georgia, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and like Kennesaw State or whatever. Every Georgia school that you played, you guys went undefeated against, or at least got at least one victory against.
I
Like,
think that might have been a couple of years ago. It wasn't
okay,
last year. It might have been the year that I got there. I can't remember in 2024. We didn't play Georgia that year though.
okay.
Georgia. Yeah, I'll say I'll just keep you there.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I get where it's one of those where sometimes they might not want to play like quote unquote like little brother. I get that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, no,
That's kind of like the WVU Marshall thing here, where in West
yeah.
Virginia, like WVU really has nothing to gain when they play Marshall, and Marshall has everything to gain. So, but I saw that and I was like, I didn't realize how successful you guys had been until I kind of started looking into it. So, and we'll talk about that a little because that is something that like me as a strength coach, like I struggle with of like how do we get measured as a strength coach? Like, do we get measured on wins and losses? Do we get measured solely on injuries? Should there be a performance aspect to it? Like, and I have that question down the line here. But
Mhm.
before we kind of get to that, what do you think, like, from all those internships that you had and GA positions and all those opportunities that you had early on in your career, what were some of the like biggest takeaways that you took from those? And then what would be something that, as I mentioned before we got on here, like me now having interns and GAs and kind of being in this mentorship role, what would be something that, and you probably have interns and GAs and stuff as well too, like what is something that you learned as an intern, like as the mentee, that you feel like has stuck with you? And then what is something that now potentially as a mentor that you really try to like express to your like understudies?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think for me during my internships, like I was very fortunate in the coaches that I was around. Obviously, Zach Dakin at TCU, Hunter Bell was at Elon my junior year. He's the director of strength and conditioning at Arkansas baseball right now, and everybody who comes through that TCU program has one thing in common, and that's that they do the simple things really, really well from a coaching perspective. At 18 years old, when I first started at Elon, looking in the room and seeing these high level coaches doing their business, it was one of the things where how can I get to that level? And the biggest thing that Nick DeMarco told me in my time there was anybody can write a program, can do the X's and O's, can read it from a book. But the thing that's going to take the most time and continues to take the longest time is the coaching aspect. So being able to get comfortable on the floor, being able to get comfortable in the leadership role, the cues, being able to have that coach's eye. That was the thing that I think was most important for me in my internship role, and something that I really stuck with. I mean, obviously the learning process of learning different programs, learning the X's and O's, the science behind it, that was very important. But I think for me, the biggest thing that I took away from my experiences was trying to spend as much time on the floor that I possibly could. Didn't matter what team was on the floor. Didn't matter if I was if it was baseball or if it was women's track and field. Like I tried to get as many coaching reps and coaching cues as I could during that small time. Um, excuse me. And I think that was the biggest thing for me in terms of my success. I think. One second. Sorry, I'm coming back from a little bit of sickness, but I think for me, um, that was a big thing for me. And then obviously seeing it at a high level, like Zach does a really, really good job of doing the little things really, really well. And his program, like if you were to look at it on paper, is not anything crazy. It's not flashy. Like you would expect from Zach Dakin, like something that's this super like grand thing for where he's at. Even Arkansas's program, but it's not. It's the basics done savagely well over time. And like you can take any program, and I forget who said this. I think it might have been Jordan or maybe it was Hunter, but they said that I would rather have a really really well coached program that was average than a great program that was coached without any intent or any good coaching in that matter. And I think that was the one biggest thing. And we get GAs in all the time. Like we have a GA right now. He's awesome. He's getting ready to graduate. But the first thing that came up when he first got this job was, hey, I have all this information. Like, what do I need to do for the next step? And so watching him on the floor with his teams and watching him and how he goes about his process, like the biggest thing was the intent that he had on the floor, like the way he was coaching, the way he could be able to command a room. Like I'm a little bit old school in the sense where it's like you got to be able to know how to command a room and be able to command a room well to be able to get your point across. Like it can't be one of those things where you're just kind of like, giving them the program and being like, oh, go ahead if you need any questions. I'll be here. Like it's got to have just a little bit of structure to it, and a little bit of ownership as well. And I think that was one of the biggest things. And I still work on that every day. Like even when I talk to other coaches, like Hunter Bell and Zach and all of them, like it's a continuous process for me. Like especially as I go through my program of philosophy and trying to find new ways of achieving athletic performance. Like how can I be able to cue this movement right? How can the structure on the floor be better? How can I, make this session flow a little bit better? Like it's an ever evolving process, and I think you would obviously know that as well. Like any coach who's been in this field a long time would know that. But I say that's the biggest thing that I try and get these other, interns and GAs to understand is that like, you can sit up top all you want in the intern office and read all the books you want, but at the end of the day, you're only there for a limited amount of time. So you need to be down on the floor, getting reps, getting to know the athletes, and spending as much time as you can. It'll pay off. It'll pay dividends essentially because the longer you're on the floor, the longer the coach sees that, the more like opportunities you're going to get, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, solid information. We were talking about that at the beginning. Like it's one of those where, and I would say, like you said with Coach Decant, do you guys pronounce it Decant or Decant? Decant?
It's Dacant
Decant. Okay.
is what I saw.
With Coach Decant, like, I read Movement Over Maxes years ago, and like there's no exercise in that book that nobody has ever seen before. Like everything's in there. It's just, can you coach it at a freaking high level?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where sometimes like athletes appreciate that. Like they want to just be able to come in and just do like, hey, here's the 5 or 6 things that we got to, the big things that we got to get done today. Let's just get it done. Let's attack it and let's move on to the next thing. We don't have to, if it takes you, like, again, I love Turkish get ups, and they're a great exercise. There's nothing wrong with it. But if it's going to take my baseball team like 3 or 4 or 5 sessions to learn how to do a Turkish get up, like they might not be, like, juice might not be worth the squeeze, at least depending on
Yeah.
the time of the year. You know what I mean? So it's one of those, like, yeah, it's great exercise, but it's not really worth it. Dan John's probably a big influencer, and I don't know Dan John, but he was somebody that I was reading a lot of stuff whenever I was coming up through. And I mean, I've read every one of his blogs that he put out for like 2 or 3 years straight. And he talked about, that simple thing of like, if it's important, do it every day. If it's not important, don't do it at all. And I think training should be the same way. Like if speed is important, then you need to sprint. If jumping is important, if rate of force development is important, then you need to do that stuff. Like you don't have to overcomplicate. It's really periodization or program designing really should be one of the easiest things of our job. The hard part is what you're saying. The hard part should be, can we get every guy on the team to do it at a high level? Can we get every guy on the team to believe that what we're doing is great? Like, can we get every guy on the team to show up on time? Like that kind of shit. That's the stuff that is the hard part, in my opinion. Um, so with all that being said, we kind of already started to dabble in this a little bit. What is your, like, if you sit down, like when you got the job, maybe even when you were interviewing for the job, or when you had that first meeting with the guys at Georgia Southern, the players, and you're in front of them and you're kind of laying out like, hey, here's our, whether you want to call it pillars, philosophies, standards, whatever it is, like, and those things can all be slightly different as well. What are like your big rocks? Again, I can keep rephrasing the same thing, but what are the things that you kind of stick to, and that you're like, every decision you make always kind of comes back to those things, those main things that you really focus on?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I try and my sport coaches laugh at me a lot because like I tend to talk a lot when with two recruits, about my philosophy and everything like that because it's pretty detailed in the sense that just going based off the conversation we just had is that my main philosophy and the thing I tell our guys and the thing that our coach loves to talk about within our program is that we do the little things better than anybody else in the country. Is what my main mantra is that it's not necessarily going to be like it might not be the biggest thing, but it's going to be, hey, every time we go to an opposing team's weight room, we're going to turn the dumbbells up, or we're going to make sure it looks better than we found it, or the way that we move within an exercise, we are going to do it like to the perfect degree. And like perfection, like obviously isn't going to be achieved, but it's the goal in mind of being able to do it better than the last rep, of making every single rep after the fact be better and better and better. And so that's one of the main mantras and one of the main things that our team harps on, and that's the one thing that I harp on our team to make sure that like we are really setting a standard every time we come in the weight room. Like the standard is upheld by the guys, and at the end of the day, they have to come in every single day and they have to choose what they're going to be. Are they going to come in and just check a box and lift to say they lifted today, or are they going to come in and try to get something out of this lift and try and move that bar as fast as they fucking can? So that's the first pillar that I have. Second pillar that I have as well is we're training athletes within my program. So at the end of the day, like these guys came here to be athletes. They came here to be baseball players. They didn't come here to be weightlifters or power lifters or anything like that. So when we come into the program, and I'll talk a little about this more, but like we sprint, we jump, we throw, we lift, obviously with the force component there, but we'll do more like gamified gymnastics movements. Like I think it's one of the things that we've added in our program that I think has seen a lot of success. But we'll crawl, we'll do variable, acceleration, change direction games. We'll do like back bends, handstands, rolls, stuff like that. I think a lot of people look past in terms of athletic ability, but just like at the end of the day, like athletic ability is just general awareness, general proprioception of knowing where your body's at in space. And the one thing that I used to think is I thought the best athletes were the guys with the best motors, the best engines, which is true in some cases, but I think that the best athletes have the best maps of where their body's at in space, have the best knowledge of where their body is supposed to be within this certain play within their sport. And so being able to give them a bigger map of their body and bigger lens, I think allows them to have more options, more tools in their toolbox to be able to pull from when it comes to the sport. And again, with a sport like baseball, like I like to say this too, like this is something that, the guys, like their eyes light up and they grin a little bit when I tell them this, but like we're here to chase outputs as well. Like the sport of baseball, like everything in the sport of baseball is generated by an output, like whether that be catcher pop time, fastball velocity, exit velocity, time from, home to first, whatever that may be. And at the end of the day, we can't be any different in a sense. So what we do is we chase that high density output. Like there are times where we're not necessarily, we're going to pull back a little bit maybe and look for a little more variation, build the base. But then after that, it's about, hey, everything single thing we do, like I said, is done with maximal intent and maximal effort. Because at the end of the day, you never know which rep is going to be the one that be able to creates that change, that neurological change within the body. So we'll do that. And I always tell recruits, like, it's my job to obviously, like make the car look good, but it's also my job to be able to open up the hood of your car, tune up your engine, and give my head coach and my pitching coach, my hitting coach, a Lamborghini, absolute rocket. Like that's my job. And so that's something that a lot of our guys really, really like. And that comes obviously from multiple different things, from speed and jumps and med ball throws and rotation work and everything along those lines. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the biggest thing there. And I think we can obviously go into this, but like, when you are chasing outputs, I think that the injury, resiliency piece takes care of itself, because if you're trying to train for injury resilience, like I think you're leaving us a lot of stuff on the table. But when you're really trying to maximize and move the needle, I think that, you're putting guys in a position to be hard to kill, essentially, exposing them to those high outputs and high stresses and high forces inoculates the body a little bit to allow them to experience those high intensity forces at a high level and be prepared for what they're trying to be prepared for, which is produce outputs.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's definitely something that I don't want to get too far on this tangent, but we've had 4 basketball players in the last 3 or 4 months. So our men's basketball players have some back tightness issues. One guy had to miss a game this week, and sport is so dynamic that, and our coach just doesn't want to understand that. He swears it's like because we're still doing like some form of deadlifting in the weight room, and I'm like, coach, like if it, and I could be wrong on this, and you could even argue with me if you want, but it's one of those where, like, coach, if it was purely the deadlifts, they would feel it like the next day, right as they're deadlifting, the next day, 2 days later, they wouldn't feel it 4 or 5 days later. Like they wouldn't tighten
Yeah.
up during a sprint or a change of direction drill in practice. Like that's just not going to happen. What we haven't done a good enough job of then is probably exposing them to some of those high output demands more. So it's one of those where I think sometimes coaches want to back off and do less. My mentality with that almost is like, no, we probably just need to do more of that kind of stuff to build up their resiliency with that. So
Yep.
it is one of those where there obviously is a fine line. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only, especially in my situation, we have 400 kids and I have myself and 2 GAs. Like it's almost impossible to be doing individualized work with kids, but there is an aspect of like, I would rather almost, let's attack it with more. Let's not always
Yeah.
draw back. And again, more doesn't mean we dilute down the do simple things savagely well. It just means like let's try to adjust this, and let's address some mobility stuff that maybe we haven't done some savagely well because we just haven't had time to work it in. Like
Yeah.
let's look at bear crawls, like things like that. I was gonna bring that up next anyways. Like, you mentioned like doing some more of these like gymnastics type movements, just and almost kind of like free play. Again, I think that's something that we have to all be a little bit, we as in strength coaches, athletic trainers, sport coaches, we have to be, I think we all forget to an extent that I don't know how old are you? You're still in your 20s?
I'm 25.
So 25. So I'm 10 years older than you. From the time that I was in school to the time you were in school, gym class was probably already cut down some. Recess was probably cut down some, right? Physical requirements in school were cut down. So I think that's something that we all have to also realize is that some of these kids are just coming in less physically prepared
Mhm.
do they know how to do a cartwheel? Can they do a basic front roll? Right? Do they know how to do an actual like slow controlled bear crawl? Right? Do they know how to do those things, basic things that you grow up doing, things that like you do as a kid for fun, like going across monkey bars, right? You want to talk about shoulder health, like go across the monkey bars and tell me if you can't do that as a 18-year-old baseball pitcher, then maybe you shouldn't be throwing a baseball. You know what I mean? Like there is a reality to that.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'll be honest, we probably don't do enough of at Fairmont, and for no good reason other than just timing, time availability. But it is something that I think is a low hanging fruit, and it's something that I've noticed you definitely do a lot of. Um, so I want to kind of ask this in two questions. Number one, I think of like West Side Barbell, where it's like 20% of their lift is squat, bench, deadlift, the other 80% is accessory work. When you're thinking of your training program and you're developing a training program for the baseball team, and I know you also work with the swim team and stuff as well, so I want to
Mhm.
make sure we give them a little love here. But when you're designing your training program, what percentage, if you could kind of ballpark us a percentage, what percentage of it is front squat, back squat, deadlift, any type of power cleans, Olympic lifts, we can get into whether you do those or not, sprints, jumps, and then what percentage of it is like crawling, like other like farmers carries, locomotions, like cartwheels, like front rolls, that like playing uh spike ball as part, like what percentage of your training program is laid out to where it's traditional S&C movements, weight room movements, and what percentage of it is, like I said, sixth grade phys ed type stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and I'll tell you this: it depends on number one, it depends on the time of year, but also the kind of team you have. Like I'll say this is that right now we have a young team at Georgia Southern, right? A young baseball team. Like we have 18 freshmen on this roster who are underweight, undersized. So for me, at the end of the day, when it comes to looking at these crawls and movements and everything like that, that's very important, especially from a freshman class and especially a lot of transfers as well. Like we don't have a lot of returners like on this team, so it's a lot of times like, hey, how much movement variability can we input into them? But I think the cool thing, Adam, that I tried to figure out is I wanted to do all these cool things like gymnastics and rules and everything like that, but I just couldn't find the time to put them in my normal program, my normal warm up. So what I did this year, and I thought that I really liked, but I'm obviously going to change, is change around a little bit. Is I made a performance prep block. So like basically, I give the guys like, hey, if lift starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I want you guys to show up like 250, 255, and there are these 3 to 4 movements on your card. I want you to come in, hit a crawl, mobility, foam roll, soft tissue, hit a gymnastics movement before the lift, and then and it's like, hey, this needs to be done by, like, if lift starts at, if the lift was supposed to start at 3 o'clock, I want this done by 3:05. And once 3:05 hits, if you're not done, we're starting to go outside to hit our warm up, whatever it may be. So that's been a great time. Like I kind of microdose it in. So it's like guys at the beginning of the year, like maybe that block takes 10 minutes. The guys at the beginning of the year can't do a handstand or back bridge, but now it's like we got guys teaching handstands to their, teammates who, back in their private facility back home. So the whole crawls and everything like that, it only takes honestly about 10 minutes of our time. So I'd say that's probably like 5% of our program essentially, like throughout the year, just because it's microdosed in every day, So like if you were to add it up, obviously over the time, like it'd be somewhere within like the, 30%. But I'd say this year specifically, we focused a lot on obviously the weight room while still a little dosing that speed work in just to make sure they weren't, obviously getting slower, and we had lower volumes on that. So like I'd say our weight room focus this year was probably 70, and then obviously the rest of it, the 30% was probably between our sprints and crawls and everything like that, just because like we had a younger team. Like I knew what we needed, like we needed a little bit more force output. So that was one of our big things. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, in other years, like last year for example, like we didn't spend a lot of time in the weight room, but we did spend a lot of time on the field. So again, I'll just say that it kind of depends on the type of team you have. Like I know that's not a concrete answer, but like if
No,
you have a
I
team
get
that's a
that.
veteran team, who's pretty strong, it's like I have a guy right now who can, Zercher squat 405. Does he need to get up to 500? Absolutely not. It's like he needs more time spent in his jumps. He probably is such a force dominant athlete that he needs more of that like stretch shortening cycle, more jumps, more plyos, more sprints, crawls, and everything like that. Maybe instead of going 70%, he needs like 40% or 30%, and the rest of it needs to be spent like on the field, or like reducing his workload. Or maybe he's just so good that we need to reduce his workload entirely so he can spend more time on the skill and get better at that, so he has more
Yeah,
economy for that. But
yeah.
yeah, it's not a concrete answer. So
No, I
but
can
that's
put.
kind of where my brain thinks about it.
Yeah, I completely get that, and especially nowadays, but more so for you guys. I mean, for us, football and basketball a little bit, but more so for you guys in the transfer portal world, where you're almost really reevaluating kind of what you're doing semester by semester, even because just of how many people are coming in and out, and especially like you said with all the young guys, like really got to hammer the basics in the weight room, and some of the stuff that a senior might be doing isn't necessarily what a freshman that's, like you said, 10, 15, 20 pounds undersized needs to be doing. Which I guess I'll ask that then, how much individual, like what kind of sports science? Because you mentioned like guys being like already be able to produce enough force and maybe being able to work on other qualities. How much of that are you getting from actual objective data? And then how much, you got 35, 40 guys on your roster. I mean, do you kind of bucket them into 3 or 4 different groups, or do you have 40 different individualized programs? Like, what objective things are you using to kind of put guys in certain groups, if you will?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and for me, that's a rabbit hole that I've actually been diving down pretty recently in terms of athlete classification that I'm obviously going to change up this upcoming year. But we actually just got force plates, so they're coming in actually in a couple weeks. So like I've been doing a lot of like this is my point of view like before like pre that. So for me, a lot of it is comes to do with like some of the other testing. So we'll always take an isometric mid thigh pull test using a crane scale. So it's like I buy like one of those like fishing or mechanical crane scales, have them pull that off the ground. That'll give me a force production. But obviously I still look at their main lifts as well. Like if a guy is really, really strong in a certain lift and he crushes all of his lifts, then it's like, all right, well, that's a pretty forceful individual.
Sorry, do you have a like percent of body weight that you're kind of like, or is it kind of a case by case thing? Like if you're like to the point where like you got a catcher that's 200 pounds and he's double body weight and everything, is that kind of where you're like, all right, he's probably in that bucket of where he's probably strong enough to an extent. We just kind of
Yeah,
maintain that
no,
quality and work on other qualities. Like, is that catchers are usually some of the strongest dudes. So that's kind of why I
yeah,
threw that out there. Whereas like a pitcher, like a tall, lanky, 6'5", 200-pound pitcher, like he probably needs to be doing maybe more strength work, like longer in his career. So is that is that something that you're like you're getting that information? Um, like, do you have a standard like as of right now without having the force plates yet?
I wouldn't say it's a concrete number, but I would say for the most part, in terms of an isometric mid thigh pull test, it's usually probably about that 2.5 times body weight, maybe a little bit more. It kind of just depends on the individual because like we can have a guy who just crushes his like squat. You know what I'm saying? Like he does a really, really good front squat, but then like we can put him on a split squat and he can't barely do his body weight. It's like, okay, well, maybe he's just really technically sound at this movement. Like, is he actually strong? And then we put him on, an isometric mid thigh pull test or apply a push up, and it's like it shows it does. Well, we're actually not as strong as we think. He's just really really good at that movement. So but a lot of it is that objective number. Like obviously when we get the plates in, like it'll be one of those things where we'll be looking at like I'll test some of our higher guys and I'll use the data between other programs to be able to quantify like, hey, what is strong enough. But yeah, it's I've been erring more on the side of that isometric mid thigh pull test just because like there's so little variety and so little skill involved with that test. Like it's one of those things I try to take as many variables out of the because again, like I said, like so and so could be really great at front squat, but he could be another guy could be awful at the front squat, but he could really excel. There's a lot of different variants that comes in between it. So I try to take a test that has the least amount of variables possible to be able to see where they're at. And I've been using that a lot to be able to quantify because like we'll have a dude maybe who's like 230 and he's squatting 315, but it's like, oh, from a bodyweight perspective you can make the case that it's like, oh, he needs to be stronger than that just based on the size. And the crane scale isometric mid thigh pull test is saying the same thing. So I've been using that. I think it's a change that I made this year that I like a lot better just because like I get a lot more objective data from that instead of like just the eyeball or the strength test in terms of that. But from there, in terms of the individualization, like I'll usually individualize into probably about 3 different programs this year, maybe 4. So I have a foundation program, which is obviously my freshmen learning them to get them to move. They'll usually stay within that program the entire year. Usually, if I have a guy that's just like, doesn't like, let's say, for example, I got a guy, the same guy who's nurturing, 4 or 5 right now. He came in, he's front squatting, 385 with a 4-second tempo and a 1-second pause in the bottom. Like it's like, all right, well, let's be real here. Like he probably doesn't need more of that. Let's put him into something a little bit better. We also look at his sprint numbers and we look at his jump numbers. And we use an eye test usually when he's jumping on the jump mat of like, what's his jumping strategy? Is he spending more time on the ground? Like, is he quick off the ground? What does his sprints look like? Like I'm using a lot of the eye tests for that kind of stuff.
What sprint tests do you do? Flies, 10-yard dashes? What are you guys doing for that?
Yeah, I do. So we'll do a fly test. So a fly 10. So what I'll do is this year I built up. This is actually the year that I built up the furthest I've ever built up to. So we did a 25-10. So we built up a total of 35 yards. This summer I did 40s, which was like in my personal opinion. Like I was talking to some couple people, like my mentor at Arkansas right now, baseball. He was like, if we want to expose these guys to the highest amount of stimulus we possibly can, why wouldn't we sprint these guys further? And I'm like, yeah, it's fair. I was like, there is a drop off, obviously, though, because then it becomes about maintaining like a guy can produce his outputs, at a 30-yard dash, but then he's got to be able to maintain that output. Like certain athletes be able to like build up over time, and I think that some guys reach top end speed before others, and obviously after others. And so I think the 40 was a good test for us to really just push the needle. And then we also take a 15-yard dash. So we'll do like a 5:10 as well, which I thought has been good. And we'll take those numbers and I'll obviously look at those, and I'll kind of quantify guys into buckets based off that. And also I'll look at also like some wide ISA stuff and some narrow ISA stuff as well. Like that's something that I don't like, my program like isn't entirely built around, but it's a consideration I make in terms of the wide ISAs and near ISAs, like essentially that's going to tell you what your guys like. For example, look at the catcher that I told you about who's squatting 405 in a Zercher. His jumps, like you can tell that he's spending a ton of time at the bottom, but he's jumping a 40 on the jump mat. You know what I'm saying? So it's like in terms of his time to take off and how he's utilizing, that stretch shortening cycle, he's spending a ton of time, at the bottom in that concentric portion. So it's like if I had him do an overhead squat test, like he'd probably have to like, utilize a lot of his upper half to be able to get there. And same with like a toe touch test or anything along those lines. But you can usually make decisions based off that as well. And obviously it makes it easier if you have plates, because you can be able to see like what that like curve looks like on a force plate, and kind of what they need from a output standpoint as well.
Right. Yeah. No, that's cool, and that's definitely something that we do that to an extent, but it's one of those where that's the blessing and the curse, to be honest with you, being at Fairmont. The blessing is I get to work with 400 plus awesome athletes, and most of them are actually really, really freaking great kids. But the curse is like it's impossible to give individualized training programs, like
Yeah,
even
exactly.
even bucket them, the most like separation that we have with our teams is like our freshman football guys and our like basketball guys that don't play as much. Like we'll get them an extra lift. Like we kind of individualize them by giving an extra lift, and then like we do skills and big skills and bigs for football, and then sometimes for baseball I'm splitting up the pitchers versus versus the catchers and position players, and kind of have some nuance to it. But aside from that, it's one of those where it's definitely something that I wish we could do better. But unfortunately, it's reality of just limitations. So
Yeah,
you
it
know,
happens.
one of the things like that, people talk about with speed and power development. Do you guys do what's your thoughts on, and this might tie into the swimmers as well, just with being overhead athletes. And when I first got into this profession, when I was in pro baseball, like people were still like not even doing, they shouldn't be doing like other than like people that knew Cressy and were kind of under Cressy's like tutelage, like I worked for the Yankees, and the Yankees didn't do overhead pressing. Like they were like against overhead pressing back in 2017. You know what I mean? Now they're different because Cressy's in charge down there now. But it's one of those things where like I never really understood that. I didn't think that made sense to me. It seems counterintuitive to me. But what's your thoughts on Olympic lifts for baseball guys? Do you use them at all? Do you see some benefit, more risk versus reward? And then what other things are you doing if you're not doing Olympic lifts? Are you doing drop bar jumps, loaded jumps, med ball throws? Like obviously you said you're doing throws and stuff, but what's your kind of thoughts on just the Olympic lifts and then just power development for baseball? And we'll throw swimmers in there since they are all overhead athletes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll say this: I have no beef with the overhead or with the Olympic lifts. Like I've done them before. Like I've trained them. Obviously at A&M, we did a lot of Olympic lifts. Same with at TCU when we did football. I know how to coach them. I know how they're done. But personally, I do not use them within any of my lifts. Nick is also on the same sentiment in the sense that like you got to understand, and I think that coaches like when you take a look back, like there's just not enough time in the day to be able to teach an Olympic lift like that, especially like when we're trying to be able to generate output and be able to get. I mean, like again, I know like we have a couple coaches here at Georgia Southern that do the Olympic lifts and they do them at a high level and they get a lot of good results of it. But it's like for me, it's like number one, it's like that's not necessarily a big rock for us. And it's one of those things I can get the same thing out of you and probably more if we did a trap bar jump or we did a loaded jump. And it's just so much easier, especially with my swimmers, because it's like, I mean, as it is, swimmers are very, they're not land based, athletes. And so it's their proprioceptive awareness on land is pretty, difficult. And so for me, being able to hand them a set of dumbbells or a set of plates and be like, hey, I want you to jump on this jump mat is a lot easier than me trying to spend 6 to 8 weeks trying to teach them how to
Yeah.
snatch or clean or anything like that. I mean, like we do. I mean, you could say like what you're. I mean, I push pressed a little bit with my baseball guys, in the past, just from like an overhead standpoint, and kind of going into that, I I don't know. Like I used to be very much against it, and I was told constantly like, "Oh, don't overhead lift, don't overhead lift, don't overhead lift for baseball players." But it's like number one, it's like okay, don't overhead lift if you're going to be stupid about it. You know, if you're going to just give them
Right.
egregious volumes and everything like that. But be smart with your training. I think at the end of the day, like if you're trying to inoculate them and make them more difficult and harder to kill, essentially, like you need to give them like, why are we going to run away from stuff like that's going to be challenging, that's going to be difficult for them. Like you need to give them and inoculate them to high intensity stressors. Like the great thing about the weight room is like this is like it's controlled chaos in the weight room. Like sport is completely unpredictable. So like we have to be able to prepare them for everything. Like we have to give them a controlled, efficient place to be able to experience those high intensity stressors and be able to regulate those, obviously based on how they're feeling, based on the day, based on everything around us. So that way then they are more prepared, they're more resilient, their tissues are more resilient. Like it just makes them more robust and it makes them more capable at the end of the day. But from a power perspective, I mean, we do a lot of loaded jumps. We do a lot of like variable jumps. So like a lot of our force dominant guys, which is essentially like that's the reverse. So like I have a force program, for example, which is like all of our elastic guys. So it's like guys who like utilize the stretch shortening cycle very well. You could see it on the sprints, you can see it on the jumps. Like they're guys who are like very twitchy, very explosive. Your narrows a lot of time. Those guys are usually in the off season. We target like a weakness program essentially. So like they're more concentric strength. So it's like taking out the eccentric, focusing more on isometric strength, focusing more on concentric strength. So we're doing a lot of loaded jumps, more non-counter movement jumps, still sprinkling in a little bit of the counter movement jump in there and the approach jump, just so they can have a little bit of what they're good at and not completely annihilate them with and their confidence with what they're bad at. But kind of focusing on that in the spectrum, and then obviously our elastic group, or I call it elastic plus, is your catchers, your force dominant guys who need to get more twitchier. And those jumps are like, yeah, we're going to do maybe a loaded jump that's a little bit lighter, and we're going to utilize the whole stretch shortening cycle for that. Quick ground contact times. We'll do more approach jumps, more like like repetitive, like multi joint like jumps in a sense. So like double broads, like hops, stuff like that. So again, like it really does depend, and I've really liked the trajectory we've gone. Like I've done a lot more. Like I was very individualized my first off season here, and I've kind of scaled back a good bit in terms like the A block is, and you were talking about this too, about how hard it is to individualize. Like I'm gonna be honest, if you look at our card, like the B block and the prep block is all the same. Like it's
Yeah.
all the same. Even our C block, like all of our accessories are the exact same. The only thing that might change is like some of our advanced guys might be doing like a single leg RDL or a landmine RDL versus like our freshmen and force guys are doing more bilateral RDLing because
Right.
like I'm trying to increase that force capability and trying to get them bigger and stronger in that case, and we could do a little more volume in a bilateral sense. But and then obviously our A block is where we individualize a little bit. So like the A block, it's like they're still going to do the same movements. Like everybody will split squat, but it depends on the implement of it. Like our freshmen will do like more of a tempo, like around like 3 seconds on the way down, 1 second pause at the bottom, back up. Maybe our force dominant guys, so our elastic guys are going to be doing more like pin squats at deeper ranges of motion, or like deeper range of motion split squats, or more like ISO squats, like long duration ISOs. And then maybe our elastic group is going to be doing more like eccentrics, like maybe more like pauses, like 3-part pauses, or more like just slow overcoming, super maximal eccentric. So it's like it's the same movement, it's just the dosage and
Right.
the emphasis that essentially
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, that's something that I think to an extent, like with some of our teams, like in a practical sense, we could probably get away with doing some of that. Like even our baseball team to an extent, because you can see it. Like we don't have force plates. I've worked with them in the past. We are thinking about getting them, which again I told you before. Like we have GPS. We have our exercise science department has force plates. So we did get some of our athletes down there this year on it. But in terms of having the convenience of readily available in the weight room, we don't. But it is something I'm thinking about getting, and that's something that I would definitely start to do. But you definitely see it. Like you can definitely tell the difference between a 5'9", 185 pound catcher and like a 6'1", like bouncy center fielder. Like there's a difference there. Like you know what I
Mhm.
mean. Like the catcher is going to accelerate really well, and they're going to squat and deadlift like crazy, and that outfielder is going to be bouncing all over the place and hit our fastest speeds and all that. So so let me ask you this because I would just like to know we had a baseball guy this fall that just transferred in. He actually tied our school record for our 30-yard fly. So we do a 30-yard fly, 20-yard build up, 10-yard fly in. Um, he hit 21, 31 miles an hour. What do you guys, what's the fastest you guys have kind of hit, if you don't mind me asking, like what your guys hit on that kind of 30 to 40 yard range?
The fastest I've ever seen is we had a guy hit at 9-1. which is about that's like 22 point something
Okay. Yeah, I do
miles an
mine in
hour.
miles per hour because the guys get it. It
Yeah,
tells
I
us
do
what
the
it
same
is in
thing.
seconds, but our guys get the miles per hour thing more. So it's honestly that's become my like one of my favorite things. Like I love the speed training aspect of things. It's literally like my favorite thing to work with our guys with and our girls. We have a girl on the basketball team that has our school record. She ran a 19.3. Like
Hmm.
that's freaking moving for a Division II basketball player, Division II
Yeah,
female athlete in general. Um, so that kind of brings me into some of the arm care, shoulder health, that kind of stuff. Again, it's a buzzword in my opinion a little bit. But let me go back to one thing I wanted to mention. I don't know if you played around with this. I've become a lot bigger fan of it for our baseball guys as a way to get a little bit of a power. Like you mentioned, the push press. We've been doing a lot. Like the last 2 years, we've been doing a lot of landmine jerks. Like I just
mhm,
feel like
yeah,
I like landmine presses anyways. But we've been doing a lot of landmine jerks for our baseball guys, and I honestly started doing them a lot with our football guys too. We were doing them in season years with football because it's just like, especially in football, as guys' shoulders start to get banged up throughout the season, it's a way to still be like violent overhead
yep,
and kind of do that pattern. But just there's just a little bit of like, I don't know, just it just seems like a smoother, if that makes sense, like a smoother option. So I don't know if you've
yeah.
ever played around with that or not, but I really do like the landmine
No,
jerks.
they're great. Do you know the Viking attack? Have you seen the Viking attachments from
I have
Titan?
seen it. We don't
Yeah.
have any, but I have seen it to where you can basically go both arms at the same time. Yeah.
Yep, yep. I've thought about doing something like that. Maybe even even seen them with throws as well, like doing like single arm, like actual throws, and have a partner catch it. Like
Yep.
that's something that I'm
Yep.
glad you mentioned that because like that's something I'm actually
Yeah.
been diving into the rabbit hole a little bit
We
about.
we did the throws. We did the throws with volleyball this year, and it went really good. I mean, and it's one of those where like baseball, football guys would appreciate that even more because of literally the way I coach it is I talk about being violent, and I'm like I want you to like fucking punch, like throw the bar and punch as hard as you can. Like I always
Yeah,
tell the girls like if the girls are being like real soft, I'm like, do you have an older brother or a younger brother? I'm like they're like yeah. I was like, do they annoy you? Then to pretend like you're punching them in the face right now, like that's what you got to think about. So honestly, we it's something that I've started to do more and more. Just using the landmine for some of our more of our power development stuff. But
yeah,
and I love like dumbbell snatches, dumbbell split jerks. Like I do a lot of dumbbell Olympic lifts, if you want to call them that,
yeah,
more than I've ever done in the last couple of years. Because I do think there's value to the Olympic lifts, but I also think that like throwing a lanky
mm,
freshman pitcher underneath a barbell doing snatches and stuff and catching it clean just doesn't always make sense. So we don't do any
yeah,
barbell Olympic lifts with our baseball teams. Baseball and a lot, honestly, about I'd say 50% of our teams do Olympic lifts with the bar and 50% don't. But they're still
yeah,
doing some variation of it. So all of these things considered with the shoulder health, arm care, I kind of know my opinions on it, and I'm sure yours are probably along the same line. But I noticed you had videos of like your pitchers bench pressing, and doing things like that. So what do you I don't want to say basically my answer is like training is arm care, but what's kind of your philosophy on that? And if an athlete comes up to you and says, hey, I went home over break, like guys are going home over Christmas break. Hey, I went home and I threw at my old facility I used to train at in high school, and he the pitching coach there was asking me what we do for arm care. Like what's your thoughts on that? How much is just training taking care of all that? And then there's probably going to be a follow up question to that as well. But let's start with those two. Like, what do you look at that as? How do you define it? You could go the same route with swimmers as well, like because our swim team will ask us those same questions, like what else should we be doing for arm care? So what do you think about just the term arm care and like what it really means, and then like is it okay for pitchers to be benching and swimmers to be bench pressing and that kind of stuff? Like how much does just general S&C take care of most of that?
yeah. I mean, it takes care of almost all of it, especially if you're
Yeah,
coaching it to a very, very high degree. I mean, like for me, I tell our guys all the time, like our arm care is built into the program. I mean, which like kind of like you get guys who come in and they do like they go to these private places and they do like you see guys like stand on a Bosu ball doing like Y's and T's and rotate press and everything like that. It's like, yeah, all right. Like, granted, now this isn't to say that I don't like bands. I still use bands in our program at a time and place, but like we're not sitting there and being like, yeah, you're going to do your like skinny orange band and that's going to be your arm care. Like that's going to get it right. It's like, no, dude, you got to understand the way, like when I have a athlete come up to me and question me about the arm care or like, is like, well, why are we not doing X, Y, and Z? And it's like, well, let me ask you this, man. I was like, what is going to prepare you to throw a fastball 95 miles an hour? Like like there's so much shear forces on the shoulder, on the surrounding musculature, the pec, the lat, the bicep, tricep, forearms. I was like, do you think that if you were to go out and you were to throw 95, do you think that band is going to give you the same stimulus that you would do here? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, correct. I was like, so at the end of the day, it's like we need to do high impact and high velocity movements to be able to train the arm. So from a point blank range, right? If you don't want to get super complex in the weeds, simply allowing your athletes to press under a full range of motion, right? So I'm talking about getting the scap to move around the rib cage. Like I think the biggest thing that happens with overhead athletes and the biggest like thing we get is like, yeah, the bench press and rowing and all this other stuff. Like it could be bad if you're pinning the scap to the rib cage. Like if you're not letting like creating protraction and retraction of and letting the scap actually move and letting the serratus anterior like work up, which are like two main movers obviously within the throw. Like the serratus anterior is incredibly important, but if you're not doing that within your program, yeah, you're probably going to have issues down the line because at the end of the day, you want to be able to train that arm, train the musculature through what it's going to get, like obviously on the field. Like when you train, you're getting as much extension or more as you would anywhere else. So being able to train within those ranges of motions is incredible. And I always tell our athletes whenever we're doing any upper head pressing, like it's always got to be extra. It's like, hey, like anything we're doing, whether it be a row, like I want you obviously to like when you reach down to the floor, like you're reaching up on a landmine, like you're a kid and you're reaching for the top shelf for the cookie jar. Like that's what it's got to be. Like it's got to be more. It's like you're here and it's got to be like on the tiptoes reach and just allows a little bit more. But I think a good arm care program has multiple different things. Number one, I think it has serratus anterior and low trap work, which are like two main things that when you think of upward rotation, you have the upper trap, serratus anterior, and your lower trap back there. And those are the like three main coupling mechanisms that contribute to allowing the arm to like actually throw and create rotation. So for me, I make sure that we have serratus work in our program at all times, just because like that's the one thing that I think a lot of athletes don't have. Like the first thing we do with my freshmen is like, yeah, we teach them how to squat, teach them how to do everything like that. But I also introduce them to serratus movements. And these guys get done there like, that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done right there. I'm like, yeah, you actually feel your serratus. Like you actually do it. And like we teach it in a matter too, where we actually isolate the serratus. Like there's a lot of people out there and I see videos of guys doing the serratus exercises, but they're not actually targeting it in an efficient manner. Like we'll get guys who do like, you know, the serratus rolls where they like go off the wall and stuff like that, but their backs arch like a ton when they go up. And so what I cue them up on is I'm like, hey, when you do this serratus like crawls, I want you to push your chest through your back, create a cave, reach into the wall, and I want you to keep your back flat. So I want you only to go up as far as you can until you start to feel your back arch and then come back down. And what
Yeah.
it does, that isolates the serratus entirely. Whereas if you get the low back, like you're honestly just doing the lower back stretch essentially when you're doing like the foam roller one. So like
Right.
I cue our guys up on that. They're like, man, I've never felt anything like it. So the first thing is being able to make sure that those muscles can like are obviously robust enough to be able to handle the rest of the throwing motion. And then from there, like it's pretty simple. It's like get the lat strong, get the pec strong, do arm farm, bis, tries, even the forearm too. Like the forearm flexors are an incredibly important piece of the throw just because like they're one of the main mechanisms that protects the UCL. So having our guys do heavy flexion, extension, rotation, hangs, like those are incredibly important for our guys and being able to because a lot of people think it just comes from the shoulder. Like hitting a
Right.
bunch of these, like it's a full
Right.
body thing, man. Like it's got to be from the lat, the pec. Like depending on what studies you go off of, you can go off driveline, and driveline says, yeah, the majority of velocity comes from the pec tendon, which is like that's great, right? We are going to bench. We're going to get stronger on the bench. We're going to produce more force on the bench. That's going to allow us to be able to be better in that capacity. Well, you can go in other studies and say, well, Tread says it's the lat. Well, it's like, well, great. We're going to do more chin ups. We're going to do more heavy rows. And at the end of the day, it's like, why not do both? At the end of the day, if both studies are saying the same thing or different things in the same musculature, like we're kidding ourselves and saying the fact that both don't have a big piece in that.
Yeah. When and
So
then the lower body being able to create the force on the back leg and block and like with the lead leg. And again, that's something where like I do get this question with some of our like incoming guys, and I've thrown in a little bit more arm farm, but again, it's one of those where I get 3 hours a week with our baseball team in the fall. Like I can't spend a huge percentage of that portion, like you said before, with like the crawls and stuff. And we throw in crawls and we do some of that. And we don't do as much like gym, like tumbling and cartwheels and things like that. And that's something we probably need to do more of. But um, in terms of just there's low hanging fruit, like you said, if you're in my opinion, if your pull-ups go up, like if you're strengthening your pull-ups, you're strengthening your front squat, you're strengthening like your lateral lunges, you're strengthening your landmine press, you're strengthening your bench press goes up. You know, going back to what you said before, I like the idea of you saying being hard to kill. Like we talk about robustness and resiliency, being hard to kill, like kind of what you were telling that athlete. Like, okay, if forget baseball, if I'm trying to make you harder to kill, right? Now, yeah, at the end of the day, baseball is the goal, or swimming's the goal, or football's the goal, whatever. I understand that. But if being a well-rounded athlete is the simplest way to think of it is you're going to be hard to kill. Do you think standing there and doing your Jaeger bands or getting under a bar and doing front squats and pull-ups, like which of those two, if I said, hey, you're about to go into a fight, you're about to fight freaking George St. Pierre, which one of those two things do you think would be better off for you to be doing? Um, I don't think anybody with a right mind would be like, oh, I'm probably going to focus on the arm care stuff. So I think just from a resiliency standpoint, 100%. Like what when you're doing like you mentioned you are still doing that stuff. And again, I think bands are great. Like, as you said, how much are you involved with like the pre-throwing prep, pre even batting cage, like BP routines? Are you because again, I'm not able to go out to practice. When teams are practicing, I'm usually still in the weight room with another team. So how much are you involved with like whether it's stuff that swim does before practice or some of that more with the athletic trainers? How much are you involved with baseball before they go out and throw? Like, I'm a big believer in before you ever pick up a real baseball, you should be in like a full out like sweat dripping off your body before you ever pick up a 5 ounce baseball. How much are you involved with that, or is that something that the baseball coaches pretty much handle and they got a good feel for it, where you let the guys kind of do their own thing, or like where do we draw the line between strength coach and then assisting the sport, the demands of the sport, like in the instant that they're about to go take part on those?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of it too is like as a strength coach, like, I think a lot of us want to silo ourselves, like off to the side, be like, oh, like that's not our place. And we just get them for the hour. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. Like that's good. And again, my role is a lot like your role is a lot tougher than my role because like, you have so many other different teams. Like I could go out of practice, I can do all this other stuff. So like for me, it's just a simple conversation of being like, hey, like, would you like me to do anything special with these guys, before practice? So like our hitters, for example, like we do have a routine for hitters and we've like that routine's kind of looked different every other year as we kind of fine tune the process. But for some guys, it's like, hey, like we're gonna go out there, we'll take some PVC pipes out there, we'll do some like rotation work. So like we'll do some like big rotations, some swings, just to kind of get their spine moving, get their hips moving a little bit too as well. And then we'll probably potentiate that with a heavy med ball throw or potentiate that with a fast PVC pipe rotation. So it's like getting them prepared enough. And like some guys need different things. I actually had a great conversation with my hitting coach, and obviously the conversation I've had with him, like we actually sat down and looked at each guy, and he told me he was like, yeah, this guy, whatever, he's got a slow swing, like he takes a little bit of time. He's more like, like he swings a lot with a lot of power. Like, and I'm like, all right, well, maybe we need to give him what he's really good at. Maybe let's give him some heavy med ball throws or, and work with that. And like, especially in season and then off season, let's get him to move a little bit faster. Let's get him to grab a PVC pipe with some like lizard skin on it and let him move. And so that's kind of one of the things on the arm care side for our pitchers. Usually what I do is I give them time. So I'm like, hey, if we warm up at 3:15, you need to be out there by 3 o'clock, 2:55. And usually what I'll do in the warm up is I have like a space where it's like, all right, you have your foam rolling, scap cars, all that other stuff like that. Like I want you to hit some like pretty intensive stuff in there. So it's like a lot of like more like full range of motion, like getting the scap moving, getting some blood flow to it, getting the lap moving, like maybe some crawls, like some all fours, like back around, some back bends, maybe some handstands if they want it. Like I give them a little bit of autonomy and variation in what they want and from what I've taught that I feel comfortable in giving them. So it's not like I'm giving them a movement they've never done. Like that's like I can't trust them to do it the right way. But then the warm up kind of takes care of a lot of that. So like they'll do a full dynamic warm up either with me or if we go far enough in the season or in the off season, like they know the warm up by heart, so they'll do it on their own essentially. So yeah, like by the time they get finished, but by the time they get ready to throw, like they are sweating. Like that's the goal right there. Because at the end of the day, I mean, look at I think one of the biggest things that's kind of funny. Like it's not a byproduct of this, but you look at Paul Skeens, and I don't know if you've heard of Paul Skeens warm up, but his warm up takes him 2 hours to do. Like the guys in the Pirates, like I've never seen anything like it. But like, granted, am I saying that everybody needs to have a 2 at warm up? Absolutely not. But the premise is there, like you said, that's like he's doing everything he possibly can to be able to get ready to throw. Like, I mean, I think I have his warm up actually right here. It's like it was like he does what was it? He does like breath work. He does like some cardio beforehand. He does hips, glutes, oblique, core. He does some Nordics, some pistol squats, some back extensions, some joint based movement, mobility stick, shoulder to, you know what I'm saying? Like it's everything. It encompasses everything. So like arm care, like isn't just, yeah, it's important obviously before you throw, like to be able to make sure the shoulder and the upper half is warmed up, but like also the lower half as well to be able to make sure that everything is properly sequenced. There's total blood flow throughout the entire body to be able to make sure that you're ready to be able to sequence yourself properly. And when you get on the mound, it's just, hey, let's go.
Yeah, no, I love that, and that's something that again, I wish when I was in pro baseball, obviously I did a lot more of that stuff, and it's something that I've print out like a little. I put together like a little printout thing that I give the baseball team, and we do some of that for even like on the road for football and stuff like that because I don't know, I don't travel to the away football games either. So something like I give them a little, they get take a little travel bag and they have some stuff in there that they should be doing, and it's also that they should be familiar with and know how to do. And I think the guys that really do care, they do it. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where like I think of like knowing what Skeens does and like seeing what other big league guys do. I mean, when I was with the Rockies, like Charlie Blackmon had like literally the most dialed in routine I've ever seen anybody do. I mean, he was in. I never saw him during the season. I only saw him during spring training, but that dude was like a robot. And again,
Hmm.
there's a high level athletes, there is a boringness to what they do. Like that is they get they embrace the monotony of doing the same things over and over again. And I think that's a reflection of just where they've got how they've gotten themselves to that place. Not all of them have to, but the ones that have really had to work and get to that point, like there's like a mundane thing that they just embrace. So I love that, and like it goes back to what you were saying before, like basically what it sounds like is part of what their warm up is some of the same stuff that they're doing kind of as that preparation phase before the actual warm up in a lift. They're doing that same type of stuff for their pre-throwing and pre-hitting. Um, what about? Well, let me ask you this too, because this came in my mind when you were talking about that. Have you noticed? Because I've kind of thought about this, but maybe not as much in the sense that when you were saying it, you mentioned like so. For example, you have a hitter who like has like just a slow swing, like whatever doesn't have the bat speed. Have you noticed like any type of trend between the type of guy they are in the weight room and then the like type of guy they are at the plate, the way that their swing is, and then also how they get on the mound. Like guys that have really long, methodical deliveries, are they the same guys that are also like your slow kind of guys in the weight room? Is that something that you've noticed? Because I'm sure I've noticed it when I was in baseball, but just without being around the game as much now, like is that something you're seeing as well? Like when your
Yeah.
hitting coach says, "Hey, this guy's struggling to do this," you're like, "Well, he also can't jump or sprint very fast either." Like, is that something that you're kind of seeing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, usually your guys with your longer swings like are usually going to be some of your more like power hitters. I think essentially like I think the guy I was referencing, I mean, he's one of our twitchier guys, but he's also like incredibly like strong in the weight
Yeah,
room, and he's also like very like his body is built around the fact that he's built like a Dorito, but like he's incredibly immobile, upstairs. So
yeah,
he generates a lot of force behind the swing as well. But yeah, usually I mean you can usually make an assumption based off that.
yeah,
Like you have your outliers where it's like the skill and the physical capability just don't connect. But
right,
for the most part, if you see a guy who's got like a slow, like power swing, chances are he's going to be your guy that you're really hammering in the weight room with a good bit of force. And our center fielder right now, he's a smaller kid. He's got the fastest swing I've ever seen. Like that dude, like you blink and the bat's behind him already. So it's like, and he's very, very twitchy dude, utilizes, his elastic qualities really well. So yeah, you can kind of say that. I say pitching might be a little more difficult because sometimes like yeah, sometimes it's not. Like I think swing is a little bit better than that because like for pitching, a lot of guys can use that momentum a little bit better. Like they can like get up and down the mound a lot better,
right,
especially from the windup. And it's like some guys do take a little bit of time. And actually, I was having this is definitely not a reflection of like what I believe, but like I was having this thought process of like, well, how much actually like rate of force development power do we actually need for a pitcher if like he's dictating the movement and he's able to dictate the pace of the game down the mound? Like, should we just be like pounding this guy with like force, like being able to allow him to put as much force in the ground and his back and front leg as possible? Which is true. I obviously like I was just being a devil's advocate there and just trying to
yeah.
stir up something with one of my
No, I think that makes
connections. But
yeah, I think
yeah,
that makes sense. That is one of those things where like there's definitely still an aspect of rate of force development for pitchers, but
yeah,
it's not quite because they can be very methodical and slow down the mound and stuff like that. But the other thing I was going to ask, kind of going back to speed training and things like that. So when I was with the Rockies, we didn't do any speed training during the season because we kind of just, which is partly true, we kind of just assumed that they were getting, especially the like obviously the position players. We assumed that if you were playing in the game, you were probably going to at least at one point in time run out a ground ball, run down a
hmm,
fly ball, run down a foul ball if you're an infielder, whatever it is, and you're going to hit that max sprint at some point, at least a burst of sprint, be a burst
hmm,
of speed at some point during the week. And then we also played 6 games a week too, which
yeah.
isn't necessarily exactly what you guys are doing at the Division 1 level. But what are you guys doing in season wise in terms of overall volume dropping off, intensity staying the same? Like how does that fluctuate? And then how often are you sprinting guys from an actual speed development standpoint during the season?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The rabbit hole I actually just got done diving really into. So in terms of the intensity, we'll lift twice a week. Some of our development guys, like you said in your football, like lifts, like we do the same thing. So we'll have a development lift in the year. So it's like once we get into the season, we start to figure out who's really not playing. I'll have an extra lift on like a Friday or a Thursday where guys can kind of come in, and most of it's going to be like, hey, like you're not playing, let's still get stronger, let's still do it. So at the end of the time, like let's say something does happen, you're going to be in a fantastic spot. Like you're not dropping off, you're actually getting better throughout the year. Um, but intensities for us depends on the travel. So last year I did opponent. This year I did travel. So basically, like the more stressful our trip is going to be, the less we're going to be in the weight room that week, and essentially, because it's like I got to look at it from a lens of like, can we recover? So like, if we travel to JMU, which is an 8 hour bus ride, and I hit them with an 85% intensity, it's like it's not that much, but it's like, is that enough recoverable in the sense that's like we leave Thursday morning, early in the morning, like are they actually going to be able to recover on a bus? No, probably not. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably make that week more of like one of our 65% to one of our lower intensity weeks. And then obviously the weeks where we're home for a good bit, that's where I hit some of our higher intensity. So like our 80, 85%, depends on the guy. Like I think some of our more twitchier guys will only touch 80. Some of our more like heavy force stamina guys, like within the programs I was talking to you about earlier, like we'll hit 85% just because like they thrive under that like time under
Right.
tension. They thrive under that concentric strength essentially.
What 2 days out? So you guys obviously have midweeks a lot, Tuesday, Wednesday, midweeks. What days are you guys usually training? Mondays and Thursdays,
Mondays and Wednesdays
Mondays
usually.
and Wednesdays. Do you
Yeah.
have any guys that like when you, especially if you're home, do you have any guys that want to be like, and would you be okay with this, that we're like, hey coach, can I lift on Saturday morning before our game? Like, is there instances where you let guys lift like during game days, like on game days?
If I could, I would. It just gets a little messy in that sense, especially with an Olympic weight room. Like if I had my weight room, I would tell guys, "Hey, that you got 2 lifts this week. Come in and hit them at like because I sent out a questionnaire actually at the end of the fall, and I was like, "Hey, like give me your honest opinions about how the fall went. Like if you can make the training schedule, what would we do?" We had a couple guys who would love to lift on a Tuesday midweek. We have a couple guys who would like love to lift on Wednesday. So it's like if those guys who want to lift on a Tuesday midweek, I'd be like, "Hey, look, come in before or after, and let's get after it." Or it's like, hey, if you feel comfortable and you want to lift on a Friday and you don't want to lift on a game day, that's perfectly fine with me. Let's go Monday, Wednesday. So it's like I'd love to be able to give them that much variety, but like with our Olympic weight room and how much, we don't. It's a good space, but it's not a big space, so it's not like I can just have guys floating in like whenever I
Right.
want.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll usually go Monday, Wednesday, and then obviously depending on your midweeks. If we have 2 midweeks, we usually go a Monday, Thursday, or we might even just go like just a Monday hybrid lift, which is just like, hey, we're only able to get one lift in. It's pretty hard for us, honestly, to get a lift in on the road. Like we sometimes will, and I'll usually it's like if we have to, like I will. But for the most part, especially those Thursdays, like there's just so much to do on a Thursday. It's just not realistic a lot of times to do that. And on a Friday too, like we tried Friday game lifts, and it's like I love Friday game lifts, but the guys like just don't like it. They don't like waking up super early to go lift. And it's like, all
Yeah.
right, man. At the end of the day, too, it's like I get it. It's your like you guys are the ones playing the game. Like if you don't want to lift that day, that's fine. We'll get what we need in. But
Right.
you know,
Yeah, and that's something that like having not been in the D1 baseball world where like I've only had to worry about that team. When I was in pro ball, that's kind of I really kind of almost left up to the guys. Like, look, you got to get 2 total body lifts in. You can do four like partial body lifts. You could do two
yeah,
totals. Like you just got to get
love
it
that.
in. We never made them lift on travel days, like the days that we were like, we go from freaking Lexington, Kentucky to Charleston, South Carolina. Like we're
Hmm.
not going to wake up on that travel day and lift. But I think one thing like that I would definitely consider, or the way that I would kind of think about it is like in the fall, like for a baseball strength coach, like in the fall, like that's our time of the year. In the
Oh,
spring,
100%.
that's their time of the year. You know what I mean? Like in the
Yeah.
fall, you're gonna do what we want you to do. In the spring, we're gonna maybe let you guys have a little bit more say in what we're doing, just because it's from the buy-in standpoint. But really, it's because like we don't know what they're going through. Like we don't always know the
Yeah.
body. It's something that you said. And I don't want to be like devil's advocate about it, but I was kind of thinking. You mentioned like uh you're going on a trip. So let's say you're going to JMU, and on that Wednesday lift, you might drop the intensity. But how does coming back from JMU then affect your Monday lift? Like, is it something where you would think about, hey, we're going to actually ramp up because we know we're traveling, because we know when we come back, we're going to be zapped from a long bus ride
Hmm.
back on Sunday night, and that Monday lift is going to be affected. So, is there a thought of, hey, let's go 80%, 80%, and then we come back from JMU, we're going to go 70%, 70% on that following week? Is that something? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking out loud when you said that because I was like, okay, that makes sense, but I could also see where the other way around would make sense as
Yeah,
well.
you're absolutely right. I mean, again, I usually do it. I go up based off the residual. So like what I'll do is I'll map out my entire season and essentially put like stress value. So like I'll assign a number to how stressful the trip is going to be for every
Mm.
single trip that we make. So I can see throughout the week, like I can see every single trip mapped out on how stressful it's going to be. And so what I do is I take the amount of hours we're traveling, the amount of time zones that we would cross like while we're traveling, as well as the mode of transportation, bus or a flight. So it's like we're flying, it's probably a little more intensive than if we're busing. But basically, I'll look at that, and then I'll get an arbitrary number. And then as I'll look at the weeks, I'll be like, okay, well, our home games are going to be 0 because we're not traveling. Like those will be easier weeks. But then obviously, it's like if I look at week 2 and I know that we travel to the Citadel, and then I know the next week we actually hop on a flight and we go to Texas State, I know that week's going to be a subjectively higher week. And usually, what I'll do is I'll program our 80%, our 85% around the weeks that we're home, and then it's just a residual effect. So at the end of the day,
So
it's like I hit our residual effect once out of the 30, 40 days at the end of the day. Like if we're going to JMU, for example, just to take your example, like the week before we go to JMU, we're hitting a 65% or a 60%. The week you come back, we're hitting a 65%. So I
I
usually
see
go
what
up by
you're saying.
5% increments
Yeah.
right there, because like at the end of the day, and you said this as well, like I got to look at the cup of water. Like if I'm looking at this as their cup of water here, like and how much they're putting into everything. Like I need that cup of water mainly built up for the skill for the sport. So I try and err on the side of that. We've actually seen really good results. Like guys can still get incredibly stronger at that 80, 85% mark. Like I don't need
Right.
90 or 95% to do that. And I think that kind of just zaps them a little bit. I think I pushed a little too hard our first year we were here and kind of learned from that. And you can ask probably anybody else and they kind of follow a similar model as well from
Well,
like an intensity standpoint.
and something else that I think about too, and another thing that we're hindered at the Division II level is like we don't have people here over the summer. Like it's not mandatory.
Yeah.
So it's like we might have
Yeah.
20, 25 kids here. Most of them are just football guys, which is good. But it's like, we work up to in the spring, and this is not like a flex. This is just because it's these guys are so still untapped potential. Like we'll put 50 pounds on like every football kid's
Yeah.
squat and deadlift over the spring. Like maybe not a senior, but like every juniors and down, like they'll go from squatting 405 to 455 in the spring. Like, but especially without having him here over the summer, if you just assume when they come back in the fall, like, and what I'm getting at is like a training max in the fall for baseball
Mhm.
is not the same as it's not the same max that you would be able to base the percentages off of in the spring. So like
Yep.
what you're saying is like if you hit a heavy single, like this is what I usually end up working up to like 80s or 85% for like a heavy single at some point
Yeah.
during like a month. Like you said, you're kind of like looking at that 3 to 4 week at a time. And you're like, all right, we're away for 2 weeks, we're home for a week, then we're away again. That week when we're home, that's the week we're going to hit that 80%
Yep.
double, triple, single, whatever it is. But
Yep.
that actually, that day, relative to how they're feeling and what their body's going through, that actually might be like a 90% single
Yep.
because of what they're feeling. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's where, like, again, I like training maxes, but I don't think training maxes are really, that's where obviously see velocity based training and all those things coming into play. Like, that's probably a better way to regulate things like that just because of
Mhm.
the fact that you don't really know what else is going on. And I mean, I know as somebody that, like, I still love to train, and it's like, there's days where, like, I know I'm feeling great and I'm going to be able to hit a PR. And then, like, the very next day or 2 or 3 days later, like, I'm not the same person. Like
Yeah.
that same weight, 405 just doesn't feel the same. Like it feels like 500 pounds. Like it doesn't sit.
Yeah.
So, um, how much? So I do want to, just because injuries are at the top of my mind, because I just had a conversation with our basketball coach about these 4 low back strains that we've had. And I don't want you to get into injuries necessarily. Like I know that's like a weird, it's like a kind of a taboo, weird thing to talk about to an extent. But when injuries do occur, because no matter what we do, no matter how freaking perfect our training program is, we're still dealing with the chaos of sport. We're still dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds that don't eat right, they don't sleep right, they party and do things that aren't driving performance. No matter what we do as a strength coach or as an athletic training staff or even as a baseball coach, injuries are still going to happen. It's just part of it.
Mhm.
What kind of conversations, or how do you handle a conversation if something happens? Like hopefully nothing does, but if something happens, guy has a hammy, guy has a UCL, whatever it is, have you been in situations where you've had a conversation with coaches? How do you handle that? Like I said, I don't ask this question a lot, and I'm something I'm going to be starting to probably ask more of the coaches that I interview because it is something that, like, I feel like I've done a good job of handling it over the years. Um, but sometimes it's just like the coaches just don't want to listen, for lack of a better way to say it, like, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
and when I say they don't want to listen, they don't want to listen to the fact that, coach, we could do everything right and shit still happens. Like, so what, I mean, what's your thoughts on all that? Like, obviously we're performance driven. The more we drive up performance, hopefully the more resilient our athletes become, the more bulletproof they become, but they still got to play the game. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I love my job and I love the guys that I coach. And man, I was so like whenever I'd have an athlete injured, man, I'd take it so personal. I'd be like, man, I'd beat myself up about it, and I'd be like, man, what can I do? What can I change? And like you said, man, like you got to think we're dealing with still kids now, college athletes. They're gonna go out and have a good time and not sleep and play Fortnite till 3 a.m. in the morning, and that's not high performance. We try and educate them as much as we can, but they're kids as well, living on their own. And so like a lot of times we have to look and take a lens and look at like everything. It's like, all right, well, did they get injured because of the weight room, because of the extra 2 sets that we prescribed in squat or sprints, or did they get injured because they ran suicides at the end of practice that we haven't hit in forever? So it's like take an audit of that. Or like I'll say this: the one thing that I really like is I've built in these questionnaires for guys at the beginning during our in season, basically, of like they come in, they fill it out of like, how'd you sleep, how'd you eat, what are you feeling today, and like kind of correlates it based on conditional formatting of like how they feel. So like if they put on a scale of 1 to 10 they feel like a 2, which is like bad, it's like, okay, well, let's see, like, and they say, oh, I only slept a couple hours. Like, it just gives me a better lens into that. And let's say now that they felt like a 2, we pulled back in the weight room, they go out to practice and they, strain their hamstring, doing sprints or whatever. Then it's a conversation that I can have with our coach and be like, hey, like, looking at the stuff, looking at the data, looking at everything we collect, I can go to the coach and be like, hey, like, by the way, like, this is something that I want to share with you. I'm not telling you this is something that we need to treat as the gospel or we need to treat as everything, but like before, he came in this morning, he put on our questionnaire today, he felt like garbage, felt like a 2. And, like he ended up, obviously straining his hamstring today. Like, if that is the next time he comes in and he puts a number like that's indicative, like we might want to, reevaluate him a little bit. I just want to make you aware of that. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I thought you might like to know that, hey, we see a correlation here between what he put here and what he ended up happening today at practice. And at the end of the day, if they accept it, great. If they don't, we tried. We have the data there. At the end of the day, if we have the data, we have the correlations. Like we know what was the cause, or well, not necessarily the cause, but we did everything on our end. Like it's kind of like one of those things. As long as we have confidence in our programming and we know what we did, and we look back at our program and we say like, well, everything was here. Could we have done more low back work? Sure. Maybe we should have more low back work in. But it's like if I have a guy strain his hamstring and we've done everything and like we've had no hamstring strains the entire season, like athletes are going to get injured. Like it's one of those
Yeah.
things where it's like I can't like it's great if we go through an entire offseason, we have no soft tissue, fantastic. But it's like there's so many different things that could happen. Like I was having a call with Zach the other day, and he was like, "Man, he's like all our soft tissue injuries from a hamstring and lower half perspective is pitchers because they don't know how to sprint, they don't know how to move their body, and their technique looks like garbage when they sprint. They strain their hamstrings or their quad or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
it's not an issue in the loading, it's not an issue or anything like that. It's literally just the fact that like they're in such a bad position, and like there's groups out there that is like, yeah, an athlete moves a certain way and their body is adapted to that certain way, but it's like a pitcher probably hasn't sprinted or done speed work, or I don't know most pitchers out there who are doing continuous speed work at the end of the day. So it's like their body isn't prepared for that. Like they're running like garbage and their body is trying to compensate for that garbage technique, and then he ends up straining his hamstring at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So it's like being able to, like, honestly, it's kind of more of those things where it's like you're trying to protect yourself, like you're trying to have the data where it's like, hey, like we did everything on our end. Like if it's soft tissue work, then it's like, okay, maybe we need to implement a little bit more. Or it's like, hey, if it's soft, if an athlete is, if you go to practice and you look at practice and practice is just an absolute bloodbath, and it's like probably safe to say that it's like I can like at the end of the day, it's like we can only do so much. You can only do so much in that hour
Right.
time frame you have.
Right.
Like if coaches out there obliterating them in practice, and it's like I can't prepare them for that. Like I'm not gonna sit there and do their conditioning and have them run like gassers. You know what I'm saying, for an hour just to prepare them for practice at the end of the day. Like
Right.
that's like we can only do what we can with the time we have.
Right. And that's, and that's something that like there's to me there is like a little bit of like a I don't know, like a dichotomy, like a paradox of like like I said, I was having a conversation with our basketball coach, and he's like, well, we're backing off everything we're doing on the court because we don't want to get these top 8 guys, because we do have a really good basketball team like this year.
Mhm.
We're a legit top 10 team in the country. And I understand it. I don't want anybody to ever get hurt. Like you said, honestly, the thing I sleep really good. I'm a great sleeper, but I lose sleep over athletes getting injured. And I'll wake up
Yep.
in the morning. So literally I woke up, I talked to him, my basketball coach, on Tuesday, when this first happened. They played, or no, I talked to him on Monday. They played on Tuesday. They were off today. So Tuesday morning, after I talked to him on Monday, Tuesday morning, I woke up like an hour before my alarm went off, and I literally just got on the internet and I read 5 research papers about low back injuries
Yep.
and athletes. And like that's just like how I operate versus me just making like a rash decision. Like So it's one of those things where I presented this information to him, and he's like, I don't really care. We just got to get it to stop. And it's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that. But then,
Yeah.
it's like, he's like, we're not. I told him, I was like, sports super dynamic, coach. I was like, it's so chaotic, it's dynamic because the guy pulled it. The recent guy, he pulled his back sprinting like in a like offensive drill, like like against air, against no one, and just running through their offense, sprinting like full court down the court. And I said, coach, just because you're not like playing 5-on-5 doesn't make the sport any less dynamic.
Yeah.
It's like there's still a factor. Like, and one of the things I looked up was actually looking at basketball players, and you know this from like sprinting research. Like when an average sprinter is hitting the ground with 3 to 5 times body weight. So when a basketball player goes up for a rebound and they land on one leg, that could be 3 to 5. I think the one thing I saw was like up to 6 times body weight
Yeah.
of load, like on their body. And then you add in that's compressive forces. Then you add in uh, shearing forces on the spine. Like it's almost an unattainable thought process to assume
Hmm.
that nothing's going to happen. But going back to what you said at the very beginning is I'm such a big believer in like what I really try to hammer with our athletes is look, we're going to make your vertical jump. Your vertical jump's going to go up throughout the season. Like your 10 yard, like our football team got faster as a team this as the season went on. We got faster. Like our 10-yard fly speed as
Hmm.
a team average got faster during the season. Right. So it's one of those things where like, yes, we had some guys get banged up, no, I mean, we had a couple freshmen get like ACL injuries, but none of our
Hmm.
starters, like we had the same 5 starting offensive linemen. So I look at that and I'm like, we did something right.
Yeah.
We got, I don't know. I'm a glass half full person. You know what I mean? As much as I hate injuries, like I look at things as like, yeah, but what about the kids that maybe didn't get injured because of what we do?
Yeah.
Not always just
Exactly.
the handful of guys that did, but I don't want to harp too much more on that. I do want to, cause I know I want to be of your time. I definitely don't want to go any
Oh,
longer
dude,
than
you're
an hour
good,
and a
man.
half. Um, so I had this on here as a young coach. I'm going to still consider you because I am getting old now. I'm going to consider you still a young coach. What are some things that you and you've already talked about some things that you've made change, and I love the honesty that you're like saying, maybe my first year there we did a little too much of this. Now we're changing things. What are some other things that you've changed over your career, or some things that you like struggled with, that you've gotten better at, and you're better. You're now in a better spot than you were when you were 19, 5-6 years ago. What is maybe the biggest thing, or a couple things that you've definitely changed? Because I think it's something, and you talked about this beginning with programming. Like, just keep it simple. Like, I think that's a lot. When I have young interns write a training program, they're trying to put just the most random exercises in the most random spots because they think they look cool versus just front squat, plyometrics, pull ups, like, and call it a day. What are some things that you struggle with that you've definitely gotten better at and that you are like, you know, can relay that message to other young coaches?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'd say the first one is probably like you can't judge another person's program like from a social media like I think for me I was in a lens where it's like I'd see something happening like I was the biggest hater on gymnastic stuff movements like I'd see people doing like handstands and backflips and all this stuff. I'm like, man, what in the world are we doing, man? Like we're like let's just sprint and jump and everything like that. And I was the biggest hater. And then like you try them out and I'm like, man, this is great for arm care, but it's also like man, they were on to something. Like I think there are a lot of people out there like it's kind of like the Dunning Kruger effect, where it's like you learn a ton. You're like, yeah, this is it right here. I know everything, and then you see this stuff happen. You're like, well, they could be so much better if they did X, Y, and Z in this program. And it's like, well, in actuality, number one, you don't know what's going on in that program. You don't know what the coach is under, what the constraints are, what the philosophies are, anything like that. So it's like being open to every single type of training style, which even goes back to the arm care argument we had of like people demonize the bench. Why do we demonize the bench? Because somebody told you that, or and you were learn that from a young age, or like are you going to be able to use your critical thinking lens and be able to understand, well, why did I think that? Why do people think that? Was I taught wrong? Like I think being able to be open and be critical not only of your own ideas but other ideas and even your own teachings when you grew up, I think is a big thing. Like you should be questioning everything. Don't accept anything for the gospel. Like understand it, learn it, but then figure out, right, number one, how does this apply within my program, and number two, like is it something that like contradicts anything or actually goes along with stuff that I've said? And then you can start to build a framework of like what you like, what you don't like. And early on, it's okay to gravitate towards people and be like, man, this is great information. But like as you go on, like you can't sit on that truth forever. Like you got to be able to constantly be reshaping and relearning. And that's the one thing that I'm really fortunate of this past year that I've been like I'm trying to like keep like just pound some education and learning, like trying to get better at that. Um, and I'd say too, beyond that is something that I've changed a lot. Is obviously like trying not to complicate my program. Like I thought like social media is the biggest imposter syndrome you could possibly get, man. You see people online, they're pushing all this stuff and doing all this stuff. You're like, how in the world do they have this much time? Or man, they're doing such great stuff. It's like I need to be doing more. I need to be having 40 individualized programs, or when we have these different programs, I need to be creating a whole new accessory block for every single car that I do. And it's like that doesn't need to be the case. Like figure out what you're trying to achieve, like, and at the end of the day figure out what you don't like. The accessory block, that's general robustness right there. At the end of the
Right.
day, like everybody needs that. It doesn't matter if you have an advanced guy who's been in the program for 5 years. Like Copenhagen's and Jefferson curls are going to be phenomenal for them, same that they would be for a freshman. Like it's okay to be able to have some similarities and have some general like overarching themes and exercises in the program, and then obviously focusing on what you want. Like you like it doesn't have to be this like beautiful masterpiece. Like it's like I said in the beginning, like I would rather have an absolute dog shit program and coach it really well than have a phenomenal program and then just like not be able to coach it because there's so much shit going on.
Right.
Like that was my biggest issue. And I think that like again, look at Zach Dagan. Zach Dagan has one of the simplest programs in the country. It is like unreal. Like you could take this program and you'd be like, what in the hell is this? But he does it at such a high level that it creates high results. Like that's the one thing I always go back and actually have one of his copies of his list that I had at TCU. And whenever I'm overthinking something, I always go back to that. And it's funny because coaches who have worked under him do the same exact
Yeah.
thing, is that they have that sheet of paper, they have that program, and they look in there like, God, my program's so intricate. Like, what am I doing? And then they go back and retype it all. And it's like, it's just this thing. And so like, I think the imposter syndrome comes for all of us. Like even Zach has told me that he gets it too. Like he sees stuff on
Yeah.
social media, he always gets it, but he always has to be reminded of everything. And, yeah, I mean, those are my biggest things. It's just like, I mean, number one, keep learning. Don't be so analytical of other people's programs. Like, try and think of it in a critical lens, and then making sure that you're not trying to overcomplicate things. Because, like, at the end of the day, they're just athletes. Like,
Right.
make them hard to kill, make them robust, and make them athletic. And at the end of the day, a lot of things are going to take care of itself.
Yeah, I love that. And again, that's very similar to the philosophy and what I try to instill in the coaches and the interns that I get to work with. And it's one of those things where like the other thing that I always say, and this goes back to you talking about just being able to coach stuff really well, is like make sure you know how to do it really well, and make sure you like
Yeah.
doing that exercise. Like don't put an exercise in that you don't like doing. Don't put an exercise in that you don't know how to coach. Like again, it goes back to the Olympic lifts. Like if I have an intern or G that's not great at doing the Olympic lifts, not great at coaching the Olympic lifts, don't put that in your programming
Yeah.
just because you see me doing it or you see another coach doing it or you did it in high school. Like that seems silly. Like if you're really good at Olympic lifts, then put them in your program. If you can
Mhm.
coach them really well, put them in your program. Like it's I don't know. I don't know why it's like that. And I definitely think it's the Dunning-Kruger effect for sure. But for like, I don't know why it's like as a young coach, you want to overcomplicate things. And I always go back to like I learned that I was lucky enough to learn that lesson very early on because when I was at WVU as an intern, I was still in grad school and I was seeing all this stuff WVU football was having their athletes do. And it really wasn't that complicated, but it was
Mhm.
like, you know, it was just high level stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then I started working at a private gym, and I had this 12-year-old kid come in that literally was maybe one of the most, if not the most unathletic kid I've ever seen in my life. Like he literally could not walk and chew gum at the same time. He was so unathletic, and just like right at the start of puberty, just really wasn't ready for anything. And like my first week with him, I'm like trying to teach him how to do power cleans, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing? He doesn't even know how to grab the bar yet. He doesn't know how to jump. He doesn't know how to
Mhm.
land. He doesn't know how to do an RDL. He doesn't know how to do a front squat. And I started him off day one with a power clean. So I was fortunate enough to learn a long time ago that just doesn't make sense. That you got to cover the basics first, do the basics savagely well, and then the other stuff will come easier. If a kid can do an amazing front squat, they can do an amazing RDL, they can jump and land great. A power clean becomes a lot easier to coach them in. So, I think all that's awesome. And that's the other thing too is like you said, like if Zach gave me his program, or if you gave me your program, I'm still not gonna be able to coach your program as good as what you guys can coach it because
Yeah.
it's just you wrote it with a certain frame of mind of how you're gonna coach it and what you're gonna have your athletes do and all the whys behind everything. I'm not gonna be able to do that. So that's another thing too is like you can't just copy and paste a program from somebody and expect to get the same out of the athlete.
Yeah.
One
I
last
mean,
question, if you one or two last questions here if you got time. So,
yeah, absolutely.
um, what do you think? So obviously you've been in a good spot to where you've had some good people in your network that kind of speak highly of you and give you good opportunities to learn. But in terms of interns like developing themselves, like is there any big advice you'd give them? And you said can't be a constant learner, that kind of stuff. Is there any like books, podcasts, YouTube channels, obviously your own Instagram channel, you put a lot of content on there. Certain ways to get to stand out resume wise. Like, what are some of your biggest, like, if you have an intern and they're like, "Hey, coach, I think I'm ready to go start applying for jobs." What are you telling them to try to do to make themselves stand out and just to continue to put themselves in a position to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is like obviously if you're trying to get an internship, you're kind of trying to get a job at GA. Like we're running this too. Like people, number one, emailing us. Like we have our GA position is open wide, but the emails we get are to the wrong people. They're to the wrong sport. They're like they're like there's misspelling. Like people don't like go back and see this stuff. Like that's the first thing. Like your first impression's got to be good. And
Yep.
I say that in the sense of it's like number one, making sure that you're emailing the right people, the right coach, the right, you know what you're applying to, number one. You know like what you're getting into. Like we had people apply last year or 2 years ago to our GA position and they didn't even know where the GA was. They're like, oh yeah, it's where are we located? And they're like, don't know. I'm like,
Yeah.
do your research before you do it. Number two, making sure that when you do make that first impression, it's a really good first impression. In the sense that's like, for me, I have a really, really intricate resume template, which is like, I spent time on Canva doing it. Like I highly recommend if you're an intern out there and you're listening to this, like making sure that your resume isn't just the basic Word PDF doc. Like try and make it to something where it's like, because think about it, like when they go through a hiring process, they're going to print off every single resume down the stack. And so when I'm a person and I'm hiring and I look at the stack and I pull your card off and it's not the generic Microsoft Word doc, that's going to draw my attention. If I look on there and I see some logos on there and I say that's better for me to read than just go down and be like, okay, Rutgers, all right, like that's so much more difficult. And when you do have those experiences, like it, like for me, that's somebody that shows that all right, they're taking initiative to make themselves stand out. Like that usually trickles into other things. So I'd say for an intern, making sure that your first impression is a really, really good one and that you can make yourself stand out from the stack, not just from an experience standpoint, but from a looking standpoint, because there's also going to be directors out there who maybe don't have their glasses with them and they're not going to be able to read your 12-point Microsoft font on that. He's going to throw it in the trash. I'd say another thing too is if you haven't already, start writing, start doing anything in terms of like getting your thoughts out on paper. Like social media is a great one. Like if you can start posting on social media, that's how. I'll tell you this, when I left Elon, all of my internships, or not internships, my GA positions and full-time positions came from Instagram DMs. I didn't have anybody like it wasn't one of those things where I applied to anywhere. Like I was posting on Instagram, like reels and stuff like that, and putting my thoughts out there. And for me, I did something that was extremely like out of character. I posted my resume and like an online portfolio. Like I posted it online. You can still find it on my Instagram page. If you scroll back far enough, I posted literally a portfolio of like 3 slides of myself, my experience, everything like that on Instagram. And I shared it in my story. My network shared it, and I got all these DMs of like, boom, boom, boom. Hey, we got a GA position. Hey, come interview for this. Do, 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 do. Like all of my stuff came from social media. And like as much as we like to hate on it, like it's a good thing or a bad thing. But man,
Yeah.
there's number one such great point of views on there. Like you can learn so much from social media. Like simply just diving through somebody's page, like Zach's page, some of his old posts. Like before I went to TCU, man, like so much of my information was literally just diving into Zach's posts, Elon's posts, Joe Padula's posts. Like any good coach out there that you like that posts educational content, like diving into that stuff is phenomenal. Like social media, like I do it. Joe does it, Andrew does it because we want to educate the next generation. We're not just posting this stuff out there just to make ourselves feel good. Like we try and put educational value behind it. So use that. Use social media as a platform where you're actually trying to get something from it and
Yeah.
posting from it. So like learn from it. Don't be so like scared to post. Like it's all right. No, nobody cares as much as you think they care in terms of what you're posting. Like just get your thoughts out there, start to shape kind of what you think. And that was one of the big things for me of shaping who I was as a coach and shaping my philosophies was putting it on paper, putting it in presentations, putting it on social media, just something like that to be able to get it out there. And then terms from like podcasts, like there's so many good podcasts out there. Move the Needle is great. Just Fly is great. Um,
Do you
there's
have something like are you on a podcast? I feel like I definitely now that you're saying that, I feel like I've seen you on some posts where are you involved with a podcast as well?
there's so I'm on a couple different podcasts, but I also am involved with a podcast called the Baseball Performance Network, which is
Okay.
where like we've kind of taken a little bit of a break. So I can kind of go into that later. But me and Joe Padula and Andrew Benham, who's at UVA, we partnered and we've made this like mentorship course. Basically, it's like a giant Discord blog. It's basically like Strength Coach Network, but like on steroids in a sense where it's
Okay.
like it's just a giant community where we can like educate, ask questions, stuff like that. But if you want the free side of things, like obviously we have our social medias, we have the podcast on there. Like we're gonna ramp back up the podcast probably come this spring or this summer. But yeah, that's something that we do. So if you're baseball centric or you want to focus on hearing some of baseball's like really good best, like I suggest there. I suggest Move the Needle is also a really good one as well.
Yeah.
Like Hunter Eisenhower does a great job with that. Any books, like I'd suggest any like Movement of Our Maxes is a great one to start off with. I suggest New Functional Training by Boyle, depending on what you think of him or not. Like there are some great introductory terms there. Periodization by like just all the basics, like Bumpus periodization. You can go through and you can read like some of the other ones, like Quadrant System is a great one.
Yep.
And then depending on what kind of different disciplines you want to go down to, there's a bunch of different from there. But I mean, for me, honestly, if you want to know where a lot of my education is coming from, it's coming from a lot of YouTube videos, coming from a lot of podcasts, coming from a lot of courses as well. Like I'm a big, like, I like to listen and watch a lot of courses and presentations, stuff like that. And, just to, again, plugging Joe a good bit, he put out a fantastic Pragmatic Principles course, which is like, I'm still going through it. Like there's so much information in there that I'm like diving into that. Chris Martin has some great podcasts at LSU. He has some some videos on YouTube that he's talked in as well. That's where a lot of my education is coming from. And I think that's like a phenomenal way, especially if you're a busy coach where you don't have a lot of time, like me being able to listen to a podcast in the morning before a team, or being able to listen to one on the way from work, or being able to listen to a YouTube video. Like that's where I get a lot of it. Like I don't have a lot of time, usually a lot of times just like sit down and deliberately read. So a lot of times like I'll be doing something, we'll have something on in the background, I'm listening to it, I'll take notes here and there, and then I'll go back to something else. So
Right. Yeah.
like I think we're in a generation now where there's so much resources out there, like you can't go wrong,
Right.
in what you're gonna pick.
Yeah, I'm probably the same. I definitely still sit down and read, but I probably listen to like audiobooks and podcasts probably like a 3-to-1 ratio to what I read.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'll finish 5 or 6 audiobooks a semester, and I'll read like 2 to 3 books, like something like that. So, um,
Yeah.
so and honestly, you mentioned Joe again. I need to maybe reach back out to him and try to get him back on over the summer or something. Let me ask you this: I know I do want to get you off here and I appreciate your
Oh, dude,
time.
you're
So,
fine, man.
um, 2 things. Number one, do you guys do an Omaha challenge at Georgia Southern?
Uh, yes and no. So we do one day. It's called like Battle of Eagle Creek, which is like it's like a military ROTC type thing. So it's like the team goes out and does like a one day multiple challenge thing, and we also do something at the preseason, like the beginning of the year, like before fall ball, which is like every Friday. I call them like competition Fridays, where it's like we do like a challenge at the beginning of the year, which is like just to kind of build a little bit of camaraderie and competition at the beginning.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that might be a better way to do it. We've been doing like, so, Cary, North Carolina, that's where the D2 national
Yep.
championship is. So we do our Cary challenge every fall, but I think it's almost better if we would just like, instead of just waiting until the last week of the semester to throw like all this crazy stuff at the guys. And honestly, I've had to water it down. As you mentioned, like, or as I was mentioning earlier, when you were talking about like just that robustness, like I've noticed that every year when I got to Fairmont, the guys that were juniors and seniors were just, it's almost like they were just more physically developed and mature than some of these guys that we're getting now. And that's no offense to
Mhm.
our guys. That's just reality. Like from
Yeah.
from just an athleticism standpoint, like there's just guys that just aren't just not as well rounded athletically. And
Yep.
that's a reflection of just the culture and the age group, but also just who our coaches are going out and recruiting to an extent
Yeah.
as well. I mean, it's not just baseball, but we had a guy going back to the injury thing. It made me think about it. We had a freaking guy, we were doing a tic-tac-toe relay race as one of our carry challenge things this year. And literally one of the other fastest guys on our team pulled his hamstring, slowing down to try to put a cone in a different tic-tac-toe
Hmm.
box. And it's just one of those where like, I don't know what else to do. Like it's, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like he didn't get hurt all fall, has seen huge improvements. Like he gained like a mile and a half to his sprint numbers. And it's just like, I'm sorry, like I just, it's like the frustration of you try
Oh
to do
yeah.
something fun and then you run the risk of something crazy like that happening. We had a kid, we were doing a couple years ago, we had one of our pitchers, we were doing a bear crawl. So we were doing like a relay race with med balls. And one of the stations was you're bear crawling and you're like headbutting the med
Hmm.
ball across the line. He freaking dislocated his shoulder doing that. So it's like we do all fall building up their bodies and all this shit. And then like some crazy stuff like that happens.
Some crazy.
So
It's
it,
always
it's,
luck, man. It's
it's
always
one of
that
those
luck,
where I
dude.
honestly don't know if I like the carry challenge, but I almost don't know if it's great to like just throw that much kind of stuff at the guys like in a 3 or 4 day
Yeah.
span. Like it'd almost be better to just do like
Space it out.
spice, throw some stuff in and space it out throughout the fall. So that was my kind of more of me just talking than really a question. But But I was gonna see like what kind of stuff you guys did. But the other thing I was gonna ask is, you mentioned being in baseball. Obviously, is this something that you think like you're planning on being in baseball? Like that's kind of the niche that you've found, or is it something that you're just, and again, I know I don't want you to, like, I'm not trying to ask, like, what are you looking for your next opportunity? It's one of those where, like, I thought I was going to be a D1 college football strength coach. And then
Yeah.
those opportunities didn't really present themselves. I got into pro baseball, love pro baseball. Never really thought I'd be at the Division 2 level. Love being at the Division 2 level. And honestly, love working with like the soccer teams and the volleyball teams and the women's basketball teams as much as I do the football team. So it's,
Yeah.
and even our baseball team and softball teams. Like, so it's one of those things where, like, you've kind of made this niche for yourself. Is that something that you're planning on staying in, or like what's your kind of your big picture as a coach, like moving forward? Do you have is that something you think about?
Yeah, I mean, it's some actually. It's funny. I think about it a lot too, as well. Like, I mean, I think when I first got in strength and conditioning, like, man, I tell you what, I played baseball growing up, and I was burnt out from baseball. I was like, man, screw baseball. I was like, I'm gonna do football. So like a lot of my experience, I was like, I want to be a football strength coach, and it ended up, the baseball coach at the time was like, hey, I'd love for your help, and I was like, sure, yeah, I'd assist, and that's kind of how I got back into baseball. But I mean, I have built such an intricate network and such a deep understanding of baseball that I think obviously this is something that I really enjoy. This is kind of gonna sound funny, but man, I'd actually like to work softball at some point in my career, like high level softball. Like I'd love to work in a softball environment at some point in my career. Don't know when. Would have dabbled around with the thought of going to pro ball, so it's like that's also there. I'm really honestly at the end of the day, I want to go. I think for me, the more I realize I want to go to the best opportunity for myself, but also for like, I mean, I'm young, but I also, I have, a girl in my life, and everything like that. And I think the one thing I've understood throughout the years and seeing some strength coaches, like, I never want to be the strength coach who like looks back and like, well, I wish I'd spent more time with my family and stuff like that. So like, I'm obviously going to go to the opportunity where I can be able to get after it, but also have a little bit of autonomy within my personal life as well. I've seen too many divorce strength coaches, I think, in my life, and I don't want to be that. Like, I think at the end of the day, if I were to die in 20 years, what do I want people to remember me by? Not necessarily as a strength coach. I want the people closest to me to know like who I was, and that they knew that I was a good person and a good father and a good son and brother and friend and da 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 da. Right? So that's a little bit on the deeper lens, but I mean, at the end of the day, I want to go to the place that fits me the best, that the people, appreciate me and I appreciate them. And, I feel like that I'm in a good spot. And I think a lot of people like leave for the greener side, and that's okay. Like when you're younger, like if a new job comes up and you don't have much tying you down, and that's great, go for it. Like you have
Yeah.
all your entire life to find another position. But it's like, if you find a place that it's like here calls it the 4 Ps. It's like pay, personal life, progression, and personal satisfaction. Okay, you stay at those place. If you have all four of those P's, you stay at that place and you never leave until they have to kick you out or you die. Right. The one is like, if you only have the pay and the personal life, well, if a job comes open that has three of them, take it. If a job has four, or if you only have one, which is pay, and but everything else sucks, then you're probably going to want to get out eventually. So it's
Right.
like I always
No.
use that framework when it comes to
Yeah,
figuring
that's
out
actually
where
a
I'm going to
really
go.
good. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a good framework. And obviously there's, again, going back to the being at the Division 2 level, like the pay's not great, but the personal life's really good. And I was in pro
100%.
baseball, and the pro baseball environment is freaking awesome. Like being
Yeah.
around the guys is awesome. Like it's something I definitely miss. The road trips suck, but being around the guys is awesome. Being around spring training, like, and the other thing that I miss, and part of the reason I love doing these podcasts is, like, when I was in spring training, we would have the big league strength coaches, the minor league coordinator, and then all five strength coaches. We'd be, when the day was over, we would sit in that coach's office and we would just talk training for
Yep.
hours. And we got to train together. So like I just miss almost the strength coach camaraderie
Yeah.
of being
The
at that
fulfillment.
level, and really being held accountable and being pushed to get better, and thinking about, like, being a critical thinker. Because I think
Mhm.
that's something that's also being lost a little bit throughout every kind of generation. And I don't want to sound like the old guy that's bitching about the younger generations, but again, being a critical thinker is a huge skill. And that
Yeah.
goes back to what you were talking about,
Sure.
like resumeing, like attention to detail. Like people are losing out. Like people aren't good at attention to detail. People aren't as good at critical thinking anymore. It just doesn't seem like. Um, so it's like, one of my, hopefully he'll listen to this. He was a baseball player at Fairmont. He was my GA, did a great job. He's at another D2 now as an assistant. Like I've told him, like, look, go. He's got a fiance. Go work in pro baseball for a couple of years. Get that under your belt.
Yeah.
That'd be great on your resume. But when you got like a family, like a wife and a kid, like we have almost a two-year-old daughter. Like there is no way. Like I
Yeah.
could be gone. There's no way I could be gone.
Yeah.
These strength coaches that do it, like all the credit in the world to them, because there is no
Exactly.
way that I could be gone for 8 to 9 months out of the year and not see, my daughter and my wife for that period of time. It would be miserable. So it's definitely something that I appreciate your honesty with that, and it's something that I know it's like a weird question because like enjoy the job you're at and kind of be where
Yeah.
your feet's at, but
Yeah.
it is something that as a young strength coach, like those four things, like that's a good way to really think about it. So I'm definitely gonna continue to pass that along, and I really appreciate your time. I don't know if there's
Yeah.
anything else that
Appreciate
you
you
have
having me on.
any kind of closing remarks or anything that you want to say, but I really appreciate you getting on here, and I learned a lot, and I know everybody that listens to it's going to learn a lot. So.
No, dude, Adam, I appreciate you having me on. I just love to talk shop, man. Dude, we could have probably talked for 3 hours if that was the case.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this kind of stuff where I can just kind of like, you just kind of like, talk and chat and just spit ideas off each other. But yeah, man, no, I mean, for me, man, I mean, if anybody needs anything or anybody like just wants more information or whatever, like shoot me a DM or anything like that on Instagram, and I'm a little slow to check my DMs, but I will get back to you. I will, I promise. But yeah, I mean, if people want to learn more, I mean, all the people that I just mentioned, like Joe Padula, Andrew Benham, Zach Dakin, Hunter Bell, Nick DeMarco, all those guys, like man, follow them on social media. Those are my guys. Those are the people that I learn from the most, that hold me accountable the most. And man, they are a lot smarter than I am. And I owe a lot of credit to them. So reach out to them, and if you follow those people, and you look at their stuff all the time and you try and get in contact with them, and you're going to be in great company and you're going to have a great starting point. That's my advice for anybody listening here who just wants to learn more about me or anything like that. Those guys are a lot, like I said, a lot smarter than me. So they'd be a
Yeah.
great resource.
Yeah, I actually might have to. I might have to take you up on that and reach out to some of them, see if they'd be willing to hop on here with us. Because
Yeah.
and again, that's the other thing too is like this profession is such a networking. You have to be network kind of centric, and everybody's got something to offer. There's some sort of knowledge. Whether somebody does something that you disagree with, there's still a way to learn from that. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
kind of what you're saying about social media. Like there's stuff that you can see on social media that you might not agree with, but it makes you reconfirm maybe why you believe the way that you do, or it might challenge the way that you believe what you do. And so it's definitely something that I think we all could definitely benefit from is
Mhm.
kind of getting outside of our comfort zone and reaching out to some people. So I really appreciate it. Definitely looking forward to kind of staying in touch with you. And I'll probably get this up. It'll probably take me, I'll probably have it up on like Friday by Friday or something like that. So, all right, man, I really appreciate it. Enjoy the holidays with your family, and good luck to you guys this spring.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me on.
Yep. Have a good one. Thanks.